Hello there, I'm Woolly Wormhead and welcome to my channel. In today's tutorial, I'd like to talk to you about folded brims. Now, I'm going to be showing you how to do this on hats because that's my thing, but you can also use this technique on, say, the cuffs of a garment or maybe even the neckline, somewhere where you want to add some extra warmth. Now, what is a folded brim? It is essentially two pieces of fabric folded together to give you extra warmth. You would usually start by working the inside piece first, all right, that's in there. Then you work like a round or a row of edge treatment that helps your brim lay nice and flat. Then you work the second half and you join them together before continuing into the rest of the hat or the rest of the garment if you're doing something other than the hats. Now, you could do this on just about any vertically knit kind of bottom up hat. If you've say the hat pattern that you like has got a ribbed brim, you could swap it out and do a brim like this instead. All right, it adds extra warmth and they don't have to be narrow, you can make it nice and deep. This one is called the Intro Beanie that has a multitude of crown and brim options. It's a very versatile pattern for just about any yarn weight and any size. All right, it's called the Intro Beanie. And this is a good example of how a folded brim doesn't have to just be a narrow brim. It can nice and deep and cover your ears. Now, what I want to do today is to talk to you about the different types of edge treatments that you can do to help your hat lay nice and flat there at the brim, and two ways of joining, so that because you are going to have two sets of stitches as you get to this point, one from the first fabric inside and one from the fabric on the outside. You need to join those together to go into the body. So I'm going to show you two ways how to do that. So let's first look at the different edge types and I'll show you how to do those. Okay, so here's the first example that we just looked at. This is the Intro Beanie, and this has an edge treatment of ridges. It's a round of pearl stitches worked at the bottom. Now, what the edge treatment does is it helps your fabric fold nice and evenly. A bit like when you're kind of like folding a piece of cardboard, you would score a line down the middle to help it fold up nice and neatly and so that the edge is nice and crisp. This is the same thing that you can do here, but it doesn't just have to be a line of ridges. Let's look at another pattern I have here. This one is called the Tebe Slouch, one of my quite early patterns, and this has a completely different treatment down here. Now, this is quite easily achieved by a round of yarn over K2 together, repeated all the way around, and it gives you this rather interesting picot-like edge. And it does exactly the same thing. It keeps the fabric nice and flat, and the join is hidden in here. All right, so let me get out a swatch and I'm going to show you how you would do both of those edges. They're really easy. You'll be able to do them, no problem. Okay, so here I have my swatch, which is the first half of a folded brim. Now, I have started with a crochet provisional cast on because it makes joining those two sets of stitches that we have to bring together easier. You can join them in a different way. I start with a regular cast on and join them differently, but that means then it will be a different joining technique. So that'll be a whole other tutorial video that I'd have to do another point. It's a separate way of doing it. So today we are starting with the crochet provisional cast on, which is not difficult. I've got a tutorial for you and I'll link to that. And then you work however many rounds your brim needs to be. All right, that's the depth of your brim. We've got to this point, get back to the beginning of round point, and to create the line of ridges, like we saw with that beanie here, okay, to have that there, all we would do is we would purl every stitch for one entire round, just one round only. And what that would do is it'll put that line of ridges in, then you will work the same number of rounds the other side, and what you get is something that looks like this. So here, this is a slightly narrower brim, a slightly shorter brim. Provisional cast on, I worked however many rounds I wanted in this section here. I worked the ridges and I worked the same amount of stitches, the same amount of rows at the top side, and then when it folds in half, it gives a really nice finish. Okay, that one is ready to join. That's one example that we're going to be looking at as ways of joining these together. Okay, so that's what it does. As I say, it's a bit like scoring a line in a piece of card to fold it. It just makes it, gives it that point, and it makes it so much easier, and it makes it neater when we fold along the edge. All right. So just purl all the way around until you get back to this point, and then you would knit the same amount of rounds after the ridge round to make sure that they match, because you need to have the same amount of rounds in stocking stitch either side of the fold line. Okay, back to my swatch again, and we're going to have a look at how we can create this edge along the bottom of our folded brim. This, as I say, is like a picot edge, but it does exactly the same thing as the line of purl stitches or the ridge on the other type. It gives the brim a specific folding point and helps it lay nice and flat. I wouldn't recommend not doing an edge treatment, all right, because it's not going to lay as flat. You need to kind of give it a line to be kind of crisp and make sure that it all comes together nicely. Now this is very easily achieved. Let's bring this over. The only thing I will say is that you need to have an even number of stitches for this particular treatment. For the other one, it doesn't matter. You can have an odd number or an even number. For this one, you need an even number because you are going to work a yarn over, K2 together, repeated all the way around. So we start with yarn over, K2 together. Okay. Yarn over, K2 together. Yarn over, K2 together. So we keep going like this all the way around. See what's starting to happen there, okay? And then what you will get is you will get an edge that looks like this. Now this is a little bit dark, so let's lay this out flat on the table here. Okay, so this is my provisional cast on. These are the yarn over K2 together lines here. And then I work the same number of rounds the other side. And then what we do is we just literally bring it up and fold it like that. We bring those two sections together and look at that edge. It's lovely. All right, and we can see that we are ready to join. Again, this is another sample that I'm going to be working with to show you how to join them together. But isn't that edge really lovely? Okay, and it's really easy to do. You just work one round of yarn over, K2 together all the way around. Then you work the same number of rounds the other side of that, just like you did with the other one, and then they are ready to join. Now, this first method of joining that I'm going to show you involves removing our crochet provisional cast on and transferring all of the stitches to a spare needle. Now, when you remove the provisional cast on, it's done exactly the same way as you would do if you're working flat. So you can reference the other tutorial for how to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer them to a needle that's slightly smaller because it's possible that the stitches are shrunk around the cast on. That happens. That's something I talk about in the other video. And then we will have the option of how we join these together. So this method takes a little bit longer than the other one. Okay, this method for joining takes a little bit longer, but it gives us a little bit more flexibility, gives us more options, because although the samples that I showed here are joined purl-wise, I joined the two stitches together, purl two together all the way around. You could do this knitwise instead. It depends on what you're doing in the rest of your hat. I like a nice purl ridge like that. I think it gives it kind of like a nice definition between the brim and the body, but you don't have to. And by having the stitches already live on a separate needle, okay, they're all ready to go and you will hold them parallel, you can make a decision about how you want to treat them. So I'm going to go ahead and take these stitches off and then we'll bring them back and we'll have a look and see how we do this. Okay, I have here this swatch with my stitches released from the provisional cast on and held on a spare needle at the bottom. Slightly smaller needle just to make it a little bit easier to work. Now, to start, we have to do something a little bit fiddly. We've got to turn these needles into the middle, turn that work inside out so that we can hold them parallel, all right? And we probably want to fold that all the way up to get those two cables parallel all the way around as well. We can adjust that as you go if you don't get it kind of like parallel straight away, but you want the needles that we're going to be working with right at the beginning parallel. So get that yarn tail out of the way, that's what you cast on with. And you want to get this needle, the end of the row of the back needle, out of the way, and that's easiest done by tucking it inside. Now, where's my working yarn gone? There it is. So what we're going to do, we're going to start off by looking at the knit join. The ones I showed you are the purl join, but I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But this is a knit join, which you may prefer depending on what your project is. You may prefer the look of it. It's up to you. So we put our needle knitwise into the first stitch on the front needle and then knitwise into the back stitch, and then we knit them together and we drop it off. Oop, it's got caught. Let's do that again. That's, yeah, you got to keep that yarn tail out of the way. Let's make sure that it's not, no, it's not untidy. It's just me not catching it quite right. That yarn tail does get in the way a little bit when you start, but just, there we go. Okay, let's do that again. Into the stitch knitwise and into the back stitch knitwise. We take them off. And once more into the front needle knitwise, into the back needle knitwise. Now, if that feels a little bit uncomfortable or you're not confident that you're going to be able to catch the back stitch easily, you can transfer that stitch by picking it up, maintaining its orientation and dropping it onto the front needle and then knitting them together that way. It takes a little bit longer, but it might be more comfortable for you. It might not feel as risky, whichever works best for you. So pick it up, maintain orientation, drop it onto the front needle, and then you knit them together. Okay, so let's just have a little look at what we've got so far. That's the knit join. That's what it looks like on the front. And there it is on the back. So we've got the purl ridges where we've been knitting them together. Now, this is why I like the provisional cast on for doing this kind of folded brim, because it lays nice and flat. If you started with a permanent cast on and you'd have to pick up stitches to join them together, you'd get a little lump at the back. Provisional cast on makes it smoother and more comfortable to wear. It's worth the extra effort to do a provisional cast on. All right, so look at the tutorial I've got there. It'll help you. You can definitely do it. So let's have a look now at the joining purlwise. So with the knitwise join, we went in knitwise into the first stitch on the front needle. To do it purlwise, we have to go on the back first. So we insert purlwise on the back and then purlwise on the front, and we purl those two together. You take a little bit of extra care there to bring them through and drop them off together. Into the back purlwise, into the front purlwise, take them through, and just a little bit of a care there to make sure they come off together. Now, just as you would do with the knit stitch, if you weren't so sure about doing it that way, or you wanted to kind of transfer the stitch to the front to purl them together, then you can just do it that way. If that's more comfortable for you, there's nothing wrong in doing it that way at all. All right, so let's do that again. Do it once more. And there you go. And let's show you once more by doing them both together without moving them off the needle. See how I'm taking it through both there? And there you go. So that is how, there's a knit join and there's the purl join, and that's how you would do both by holding your needles parallel after releasing the stitches from your crochet provisional cast on. Okay, so what I'm going to show you this time is how to join them without removing the provisional cast on. All right, you can actually join the stitches straight from the live stitches that are sitting there underneath that crochet chain. It's one step less, so it makes it quicker. You don't have the fiddliness of holding two sets of parallel stitches together, but you do have the fiddliness of the curly bit of fabric there. So, you know, there's pros and cons either way, but I find this method quicker. So what you want to look for is the first stitch that is underneath your crochet chain there. So we're going to insert our needle knitwise into that first stitch, and then we are going to knit into the first stitch there, and we would knit them together. Okay, at this point, if you want to, you can start undoing the chain, because then you can keep an eye, and I only undo it stitch by stitch. Don't unrip the whole lot out. That way you can keep an eye on which ones you have just knit. So let's have a little look here. So we take that one out there. There we go. We've done that first stitch there. Insert knitwise there, into that stitch there, knit them together. Whoop, let's do that again. In, and into there, knit them together, pull them off and release the chain by 1 stitch. So you can see now that we are releasing the stitches as we go. You don't need to leave the provisional cast on in. You can, but you don't need to. It just kind of gets in the way. So let's do that again. In there knitwise, and then into the stitch underneath the provisional cast on at the back knitwise. And this doesn't want to behave today. Okay. There we go. Drop it off and release that 1 chain. Now you can also do this purlwise. All right, so you bring your yarn forward, and like before, when you're doing it purlwise, you have to insert your needle into the back first and then into the front. All right, now you might want to drop this off in 2 parts. Drop the first needle off and then drop off the back because it makes it a little bit comfortable. Let's do that again. We're going to go in purlwise and then purlwise there, and we purl them 2 together. You can take them both through at the same time, but you can do them separately. And again, like before, if you are not confident doing both stitches together, you can take that stitch, release it, pop it onto the front needle, and then purl them together that way. And you can do the same knitwise as well. You can release each stitch at a time and put them together on there and do it that way. All right. It saves you that extra step of kind of having to remove the provisional cast on and put them all onto a parallel needle. I find this quicker, but not everybody will. That's why I wanted to show you both methods. So you can do whichever one you prefer, really, is most comfortable for you. Let's change back to knitwise. Undo that chain. This stitch, we're going to undo it, pop it onto the front needle so we can knit it together with this one. If this is a more comfortable way for you to work, always make sure you grab the stitch before you take the chain out. You don't want that dropping from the underside. And that's how you would do that. I find this quicker, but you might prefer the other method. Try both and see how you feel about them. And you get exactly the same results. So you've got the purl ridge there, and it's nice and smooth on the back, no lumps. Well, we've got the pearls here. Then it's the knit finish on the front, and it really does depend what you're going to do with the rest of your project. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get round to the end of one of the joining and show you how to make up for that extra stitch when you release from the provisional cast on. Okay, so I've just finished joining. I'm at the last stitch on either side using the parallel method with the knit join, and I just want to show you what happens when you get to the end. And it's the same whether you're doing on the chain or on the needle. Now, when you release a crochet provisional cast on, and you'll see this in the video that I will link to, you will often have 1 stitch less, especially if you are working flat like for a sideways knit hat. Because in that instance, I mean, whenever you release a crochet provisional cast on, you're releasing the underside of the stitches. And when you're working flat, you will lose half a stitch either side, because that half stitches goes up to join the next row. I don't want to get too technical about it, but you will lose a stitch when you're working flat. When you are working in the round, you don't. All right, so you might end up with a stitch less. That means you've maybe counted a stitch wrong, or I've got a video on how to increase when you're joining live stitches. You may end up like that, but you should end up with the same amount of stitches because you're working in the round. The underside of stitches is going to be exactly the same number as the top side of the stitches. So you just get to the end, and whichever you're doing, you just knit them together, pass it off. There's the inside, there's the first join that we did, and there's the last stitch joined, and then you would just weave in those ends and you would carry on with the rest of your pattern. I hope that was helpful in showing you how you can create different edges on your folded brim, how you can join them in different ways, both knitwise and purlwise, using parallel needles or just straight from the crochet provisional cast on chain. There's different ways you can do it. You just got to try them and work out which way is most comfortable for you. All right, there's no right or wrong way when it comes to this. A folded brim is a really nice feature to add. I say it keeps you nice and warm, a nice double-edged fabric. This is in sock, but it could be in DK, it could be any weight that you want it to be. Keeps your ears nice and warm. Or it could be nice and decorative. like this edge here, but the stocking stitch is still just as stretchy as a ribbing would be. All right, that's on the DK and this is on the sock. Nice and stretchy, so don't worry about the fact that it's all done in stocking stitch. That's not going to affect the fit of your hat at all. All right, so I hope you give that a go, or if you're using one of my patterns, I hope this is helpful in showing you how you can join those folded brims together. If you're interested in looking at how to make tucks or welts, which is a very similar principle, I have a video for that as well and I'll link to it. All right, so that's all for today. If you could do the like, subscribe, etc. share thing, I would very much appreciate it because I'm still growing my channel. And I would love to have more of you here so that I can share all my tips and tricks about knitting that I've learned over the 50 odd years I've been doing it. All right, take care of yourselves. Bye.